Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and I'm joined by David Hughes. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, okay, mate. Good. I know what's coming, so I'll just tell you. I've been wearing caps when I've been walking the dog, but on this show, mate, I'm just gonna front up to it. And to be fair, it doesn't look that long, me hair, but it's when you look closely, it's kind of going different directions. It's just losing its shape. So yeah, I'm feeling the pace a little bit.
Yeah, I liked the anticipation of the question there. Showing good defensive awareness, mate.
That's it, mate. Getting straight at it, like Liverpool were that the essay had on the weekends.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here. That's what we're going to talk about. And then, with that being the only game really that we can address at the minute, given that the international break is here, a little bit of a downer. But we can talk about City. You know what happened, how we thought the game went, and then we'll probably just have a little look at the states of play at the minute, sort of thing, what the league looks like, some weird stuff, some good stuff. Probably just more of a chat that's going to be. So, usual caveats of it might be a shorter episode, but usually when I say that, it never is. So we will see, but we'll start off with the Etihad then. So, Dave, general thoughts on the game?
Yeah, a really intense game of football. You know, two top sides. I thought it was real top level stuff, especially in the first half. But even the second half, in terms of there was obviously less goal scoring opportunities, maybe less attacking intent from both sides. But for me, it still felt like it was a game that could have exploded in any minute, really. And it felt like both teams knew that as well, so they didn't really want to overcommit, which I thought was wise. I do understand why, but yeah, you know, a really good watch, and the kind of okay. I know traditionally you might like to see more goals, but I think it's the kind of match that you want to see from the two best teams in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think it's Liverpool City over the years has reached such a standard. It's crazy, to be honest. The two levels of both teams is just stupidly high. And although this season maybe the Premier League table doesn't exactly show that, I think when the two teams face each other, you can just really see it is two heavyweights, two proper coaches, two well built squads fighting off really. And I think maybe the best standard game I've seen in the Premier League was probably I think it might have been it was last season or the season before at the Etihad, Liverpool City, and I think Sane scored the winner in off the
Mm.
post. Liverpool scored that goal that was kind of fullback to fullback, and then Firmino popped it in. I think that is probably the highest standard game that I've seen in England, but this one wasn't far off, and I think in the first half, especially from a Liverpool perspective, we were really on it. And unlike Klopp, very, very surprising move. He come out with a rabbit out the hat, let's say, with a tactical formation shift, which I didn't see coming. I don't know if you've seen it coming, Dave, but we previewed the game last week. We didn't mention anything to do with that. It was a complete shock for me. We were talking about Jota, we were talking about Firmino, but I thought with this being City, with this being the Etihad, Guardiola, away from home, you go with the 4-3-3, and we didn't. A little bit of a surprise for me, but I thought it worked really, really well. I loved it, to be honest. I loved the formation shift.
Yeah, I think potentially what brave tactic, by the way, by Klopp. But I think what he's wanted to do is, you know, catch Guardiola and City cold in those initial exchanges, and maybe try and, as they've done in years gone by, you know, build an early lead by doing this. And it did nearly happen. Obviously, they get the first goal in the first 15 minutes of the match. They had a couple of chances either side of that as well, and you think if you get that, you know, 2-0 lead in the opening 20 minutes, then suddenly you're already on your way to a victory, aren't you? I do think as the game went on, City learned how to cope with the formation better. Or maybe not, cope may be the wrong term, but they certainly adjusted and started finding more ways to try and bypass it, making it more of an even game. But yeah, those initial exchanges, I thought Liverpool were on top, and City didn't really seem to know how to progress the ball through Liverpool in that formation. And interestingly, Josh, actually, I did see Robertson talking about it after the game. I don't think it was on Sky because the interview come up on my Twitter feed, and he did say that basically it was a tactic and formation that he'd been working on for the last couple of days, and he did want to try and catch City cold, and if they could get 1 or 2 goals. And he did say, maybe the only regret is not getting that second while they were on top, because overall it was a good performance, and I'd have to agree. They didn't seem to overcomplicate themselves in terms of wanting to control the ball. They were happy to City have the ball and just be in a really good shape.
Yeah, I mean, this match was the 11th time that Pep has faced Klopp at Liverpool and City, excluding the Charity Shield match, Community Shield, whatever it's called, excluding that match. So I think in the previous 10, Klopp has went 4-3-3. So I think over the years, I think Guardiola's almost lost his mind trying to figure it out and trying to come up with ways to dismantle this 4-3-3. But I think in recent times, particularly away, he started to lean on a 4-2-3-1. And I think the midfield two, as well as the back four, have kind of given them enough, particularly at the Etihad, to get out, basically, to progress beyond Salah, Mane and Firmino. And then they can move up the thirds of the pitch quite quickly then. I think it's given them a bit more control as a formation, and I think maybe it was I'm not sure what we'll do when the Anfield leg comes around. I think that's in February. But in this game, I just think, with us being without Van Dijk as well, and with City maybe being a bit more toothless than years gone by, I think maybe Klopp just thought this is a risk worth taking. As you said, catch them cold, because Guardiola will have no doubt planned throughout the week, probably in his own head before that as well, knowing what he's like. So I think he will have planned for 4-3-3, possibly 4-2-3-1, but I don't think 4-2-2 will have entered his mind. So you obviously get 45 minutes on the pitch then, whereby Pep can't really intervene, can't really communicate with his players, and his players just have to kind of figure it out and cope for 45 minutes. That ideally will have been when Liverpool put the game beyond doubt. I think we could have. But just a bit of insight into the 4-4-2 that Liverpool used. Obviously, Salah and Firmino were the front two. Then you had Jota on the right, Mane on the left, Henderson and Wijnaldum as your midfield two. But I really loved the way it was adapted for City, because you could interpret that as, most people I suppose would interpret that as, Salah and Firmino would press Laporte and Diaz, but that wasn't the case. Salah and Firmino dropped back, attached themselves to Gundogan and Rodri, and that allowed Henderson and Gini to drop back and attach themselves to De Bruyne. And Salah and Mane and Jota out wide were kind of blocking those progressive passes into like the half space areas, the inside right areas, the inside left, that Pep uses so frequently. So I thought it was really, really well applied. And I think, when you think of a standard 4-4-2, you think of, the banks being easily progressed through, the spaces in between, it being quite an extinct formation to an extent in England. But I think Klopp showed that if you can apply it differently, if you can kind of modernise it a little bit, it is a really effective formation. I know Southampton are using it as well under Hasenhuttl. And you know what, I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more of it going forward.
Yeah, I think the benefit of it is it's just really good without the ball, isn't it? Not that it doesn't offer anything with the ball, it clearly does. But I do think it's formation that's, I remember when Carlo Ancelotti went in at Everton, he obviously implemented the 4-4-2 because it felt like it's a structure that you can implement fairly well, and certainly when your behaviours without the ball, it's a lot easier to basically construct, and the mechanics quite easy for players to get a grasp of. I do think the one that we saw from Liverpool was a little bit more complex, and it did have more of an attacking element to it. But yeah, it worked really well. I can only think of maybe one time that City managed to bypass it and expose that space in behind the wide players, and it was when they scored. I think it was maybe what Walker gets in there and gets the ball to De Bruyne in the central location, and then obviously that leads to the goal. But beyond that, I can't really think of many times where City had too much joy getting past it.
Yeah, the only thing with using a double pivot like that is if City do get into the half space areas just out wide in like the De Bruyne type areas, if Mane or whoever your wide midfielder is doesn't get back, one of the midfielders has to shuttle over, and then that leaves space on the other side of the midfield too, if you know what I mean. And Everton has to move over, Everton has to shuffle. So that was the one time really where Mane was out of position, so Wijnaldum compensated, and then Wijnaldum was out of position, so I think it might have been Gomez or something compensated. And City, I must admit, I think the Gabriel Jesus thing was lucky. I don't think he means that, to be honest.
Really, I think he did. I'm gonna give him that. I thought he meant it.
It comes into him quick, and just the way the ball moves, it looks like he doesn't know where the ball's gone, but it looks like he just cottons on to where the ball's gone quicker than Trent and Gomez or Matip or whoever it was. But I'm not giving him that one. I don't think he means it. But yeah, I really like the 4-4-2. Yeah, I think it was a welcome change, to be honest. Obviously, we've persisted with 4-3-3 for years, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it does adjust slightly for each opponent. But I think this 4-4-2 was kind of a complete change, and while still being good defensively, it offered kind of a bank of four in attack, really, once we got the ball. If you've got Jota, Mane, Salah and Firmino running at you, who are you picking up? So
it does. Just on that, it does all go back to buying Jota. Jota's just opened more avenues now. He's been key to it, because suddenly you've got a player who can feature with the other three, with the same kind of capacity and ability, both with and without the ball. And suddenly I've got more avenues. You can play a 4-2-3-1. You can play this, 4-4-2, 4-2-4. Whichever way you want to call it. So it is kind of all going back to Jota, and Jota coming in.
Yeah, no, it's a great shout. I think he's clearly a very versatile player. I think he's played on the left, through the middle, and on the right since he came to Liverpool. He's only been here for about 2 months. But yeah, it's making Liverpool more unpredictable. It's making Liverpool probably more difficult to analyse before games. And I think particularly this 4-4-2, particularly against 4-2-3-1 shapes, and particularly against teams that are inclined to get plenty of players forward, like maybe a Leeds, a team like that. If you can get Liverpool's 4 attackers on the transition running at you, like Liverpool did on so many occasions, but didn't really make use of it, I think it's going to be a useful formation to kind of add to the playbook almost moving forward to the rest of the season. Particularly if the defence isn't firing that much. I always find that like the more attacking a lineup is, almost the more defensive the opposing team is likely to go. You're more likely to go in your shell. You're more likely to feel the fear almost of conceding too many. But the numbers of the game anyway. So the numbers of the game for me don't adequately capture particularly the first half. So City posted 1.6 expected goals. Liverpool posted 1.4. Pretty much even then. You've got to bear in mind he was 2 penalties. So without those 2 penalties, both teams are posting like in and around, 0.5, which is barely even a goal. City took 6 shots, Liverpool took 9. And funny enough, I've got a few little homemade stats for this episode, Dave. First of them, obviously City took 6 shots. City have only posted fewer in a Premier League or Champions League game under Pep once. And that was at Anfield, funnily enough, in 2018, when it was just an absolute bore fest, and I think it finished 0-0. And
Is that
Mahrez
where
hit the,
Mane missed the
yeah,
pen? Yeah.
yeah. So that's the only game in Pep's tenure at City whereby he's posted so few shots in a game, in a Premier League or Champions League game, that is. And you got to bear in mind, this one was at home, with Liverpool using a different formation. So I think that pretty much captures how impressive Liverpool's performance was on the defensive side, Dave.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. It's I just think, although you caveated that with the change in formation, as I said, I think it proved to be a positive. It wasn't something that was trialed. It was something that was kind of brought in to have a positive impact, and I think it did. Yet City haven't been at the best from an attacking point of view, but they're still City, and you can still see what they did and with that goal. They kind of punished Liverpool in that one moment that they kind of got exposed in behind those areas, with a really good finish. So yeah, it's. And by the way, as you touched on as well just there, it didn't capture all of Liverpool's best attacking moments, because obviously expected goals is based on shots that are taken, and sometimes there was occasion where the shots didn't always come off, or there wasn't always that final connection with the ball. I think had a few of them attacking moves ending in shots, that those XG numbers would have looked a little bit higher from a Liverpool point of view, at least.
Yeah. I think we've spoken about this in the past, haven't we, in terms of some of the limitations of expected goals. And I think for me, I am usually inclined to support the metric, because I think an example we used was, I think, Leicester at Anfield last season. And they played quite well, if you remember, in terms of getting towards the final third of the pitch. But then they couldn't really do anything from there onwards. They progressed through Liverpool fairly well, and then once they got to the final third, they couldn't really create anything. And I think they ended up finishing the game with an expected goals of about 0.3 or something, and Liverpool posted like 2.5 or whatever. And I remember saying, like, as much as Leicester have played well, kind of thing, in inverted commas, they've that's their product at the end of the game. Their product has been like 3 shots, even though Maddison, I think, scored one of them. But in this game, I just feel as though this was just Liverpool being a little bit almost wasteful in the final third. A little bit, almost, you got when players have got too many options, whereby they just kind of like play it in between two players, or they'll the fact that it was City maybe got in the head, and I think Mane had maybe 1 or 2 opportunities where he could have shot, but for whatever reason didn't. I feel like there's a few situations like that, and as I said, expected goals is purely based on the shots that each team takes. And I feel like there was plenty of opportunities whereby Liverpool had the opportunity to shoot, or had a break that should have led to a shot, but for whatever reason, the last pass didn't work. A player turned down that chance to shoot, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. But then, obviously, I feel like in the interest of objectivity, we should also acknowledge that City could have quite easily won the game had De Bruyne converted that penalty. There's a good chance that would have proved a decisive goal. So it could have really swung both ways. But then that just captures the quality of the game, I thought. That it could have really, it's always fine margins in these games. You referenced that game at the Etihad a couple of years ago, where it was in off the post, and in that same game, Liverpool had one cleared off the line. It is very much fine margins that kind of define it. And from that Liverpool point of view, maybe just opting not to unleash a shot, or not picking out that correct final ball, was probably the difference between 1 point and 3.
Yeah, I mean, when I got into the second half was a bit of a different game. To be honest, it was. I think the first maybe 15 minutes or so, we tried to play the same game, but for whatever reason, we were going long a bit more often. I think the ball was sticking less high up the field. It was coming straight back. I think both teams just got tired. at the end of the day, which is understandable. But I think it was also a mix of tiredness combined with both teams were almost just appreciating the point. I thought, even though City, you could argue, need more.
I think it just felt like a really bad game to lose, and you can make a case for both sides. Liverpool currently have a points lead. I think it's 5, isn't it? But they've got a game in hand City, so you could say 2. That could have been basically that could have disappeared with a defeat in that game. Alternatively, City are probably thinking, yeah, okay, it maybe is more on us to win, but it's such a bizarre season where you can't really predict the results week by week. That they're thinking Liverpool are going to drop more points against some team further down the line, and maybe that's where we can focus on trying to close that gap as opposed to doing it today and potentially getting punished in counter attacks, because Liverpool will punish space in behind. So I think that's why both kind of thought, we don't need to really do the battle today like we've had to in years gone by because of how this Premier League season's playing out. And maybe that's the mentality of both, and that's why they kind of settle for a draw.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't like draws. I don't think there's much point in them. I think, you get 1 point more than a loss for the draw. Whereas if you get the win, you get 3 points. That's worth 3 draws. So I always think in situations like this, it's worth going for it, really. It's worth going for the 3 points, because most of the time, probably, you will end up getting the 3 points. And the occasional one that you end up losing at the opposite end, you've only lost 1 point. It's risk versus reward sort of thing. Having said that, I think in games like this, you do have to weigh up what losing would mean in the in a mental capacity, I suppose, in terms of what it means from like what a player expects to achieve this season, what it means in terms of feeling inferior to the opposite team if they beat you. So I suppose it can impact morale in games like this more so than, say, if Liverpool were playing Brighton or a team like that. So usually I wouldn't be that keen on going for a draw, but in this game, I was quite happy to take it, despite Liverpool dominating the first half. Liverpool's last shot actually was in the 58th minute. So Liverpool went about 35 minutes, to be honest, without having a shot. If you look at the race map, which, the expected goals timeline on the day, Liverpool's attack just completely stops on the hour mark. I think Klopp spoke about this after the game, and he said that like sometimes you get to a point whereby City are creating attacking situations, and you get to a stage where you just want to get rid of those situations, so you just kind of hit the ball anyway. But I think in terms of football analytics, Dave, I think that's generally an approach that's quite ill-advised, isn't it?
Yeah, because it all becomes back to punish you, doesn't it? And you're facing sustained pressure. I must admit, I can be a little bit more impartial, I guess. I did think City finished stronger based on the second half, but I also think Liverpool probably were unlucky not to have more to show for the dominance in the opening exchanges. But yeah, it was just. I don't know. I still think it was just a really good game. As I said, I think it could have popped at any moment in that last half hour. Like, yeah, Liverpool didn't register a shot, but I think had City exposed themselves in any way, I think Liverpool could have quite easily punished it. So yeah, I don't think that tells the full story that they didn't have a shot in that time. I do feel like they were still a threat, even if they weren't necessarily registering any sort of output, official
Yeah,
output.
yeah. It was a proper draw, wasn't it? To be fair,
Yeah.
it was as close to an accurate draw as you're going to get, really, in many ways.
Also, I
Um,
think just quickly, we were talking about the points and not wanting to drop, like not wanting to go for draws. I do think, and this term is often used at the wrong end of the table, but I do think you can label this a bit of a 6-pointer, can't you? And
yeah, yeah,
I think it becomes a more expensive defeat if you do lose than just 3 points, because obviously your rivals gaining 3 and you're losing 3, so it's it is one that you don't want to lose.
Yeah, and I think from Klopp's perspective, which we're obviously trying to cover, considering it's Analysing Anfield, I think maybe he goes for a little bit more at Anfield. But, with this being away, he plays City twice in the space of a season. Maybe, I think most teams probably would take a draw away from home. So I can't really argue with that. Just another little note on how the game went. Kevin De Bruyne, so he had 48 touches in the game. Another little homemade stat for our Analysing Anfield listeners. He's played 90 minutes 53 times in the Premier League since 2017, and he's posted lower than 48 touches once. Fully enough, that was also against Liverpool when Liverpool lost 4-0 last season. Which is a surprising one. He posted 39 in that game, even though City completely dominated us really after we just won the league. So I thought I'd throw that one in there because in terms of Liverpool's game plan, Klopp's game plan, whenever he faces Pep, it always seems to focus on stopping De Bruyne, really. I don't think De Bruyne has anywhere near the same impact against Liverpool as he does most other teams.
Well, does that include like substitute appearances as well, is it? Like if he comes off on the hour mark or something?
No, that's only full 90-minute matches.
Wow.
So he's played 90 minutes 53 times since 2017. So it's those 53 games. Bottom of that for touches is Liverpool when City won 4-0. And second bottom is Sunday's game. And there's a few other Liverpool ones in there as well. I think Liverpool generally do fairly well in terms of keeping his impact lower than usual. Even though he did kind of get in his typical space for the penalty that was given against Joe Gomez. A little word on. In fact, no, we'll cover this now because I wanted to give a heads up to Alisson. I thought Alisson was spot on the day, to be honest. Thought he was really bold, safe hands, didn't really let anything loose. And you could argue, because of the keeper that he is, because of how well he was playing, you could argue, do you reckon maybe he's got a bit of an impact a bit of an influence over De Bruyne for the penalty, to the extent that De Bruyne knows he's got to put it right in the corner and he maybe goes too heavy on it?
I mean, it's a theory, yeah. I don't know. He'd probably deny it, wouldn't he, if you ever asked him, De Bruyne? But it was a bad penalty. Yeah, I think there's no excuse for not hitting the target. If the keeper saves it, fine. But I mean, you would have seen it, Josh, and people listening and watching would have seen it as well. But I do think, in the context of all these statistics that we've been pulling out, and especially two of them now related to that game at Anfield, it was interesting that the last penalty not to hit the target in the Premier League was also Mahrez's in that game at Anfield. And ever since then,
there's got to be something in that. There's got to be. That's got to be like a mental thing that, like, a bit of a block that City have against Liverpool or something. Your biggest rivals, whatever it might be. However Guardiola bigs Liverpool up in the dressing room, I don't know what it is, but the fact that it doesn't happen that often, but it's happened to Guardiola twice since moving to City against Liverpool. There's got to be something in that.
The only thing I would say to kind of counterbalance the argument is the City just weirdly don't seem great at penalties across the board. They seem to just miss them a lot. In the context of penalties, at least. I do think, now you've pointed out, there probably is an element of De Bruyne thinking he's got to get this one right. But then I do think there's also going to be that element of the penalty records aren't that great at City, which in comparison to, can I just say, by the way, Salah again, because I said this a couple of months ago and a few people were like, no, I'm not too sure whenever he steps up. He's immaculate as a penalty taker for me. I think you've said that. You don't love his run up and things, but
there's something about the way he takes his pens that doesn't fill me with confidence, to be honest.
But he says that to me.
No, I know. And I think fair play to him. I think on the mental side of the game as well, I think he's absolutely unflappable. I think he's really, really underrated on the mental side, Salah. Never ever injured. People are moaning about the whole 5 subs thing at the minute, the whole fitness thing. Salah's just going week in, week out, still getting kicked. And and when it comes to penalties, he never misses them. But I just feel like his run-up is the kind of run-up that doesn't allow for accuracy in terms of hitting the corner. And I feel like you see run-ups like that when players blaze over the bar or something. But for whatever reason, Salah just continues to put them away. But I think what it is, another thing that it might be is, I always feel like because of where he finishes, because of where he puts the ball with these penalties, I always feel like if the keeper guesses right in terms of the right way, the keeper would save most of them, I think. I think what the thing Salah gets right somehow, he sends the keeper the wrong way most of the time. And I think that's why most of them find the net. But I don't know. I mean,
do you know what though, Josh?
Go on.
I think they're hit with so much power and they're so fast that even if a keeper does go the right way, I still think it's got a good chance of being a goal, because the speed in which and the power that for the keeper to actually get over there and get something on it, I think that's what works in his favour. I mean, it could be wrong, you know, he could end up missing his next 2 or 3, but I don't know, I just fancy him every time.
No, yeah, he has got a solid record now. I remember him scoring that one for Egypt in the World Cup qualifier, the last kick of the game. Egypt needed to win, and I think the scores were level at 1-1. So we've got the whole country on his shoulders taking a penalty, and I think he just did roughly the same. So, you know, fair play to him, and hopefully he
Champions
keeps it
League
going.
as well. Did it in Champions League,
Yeah,
of course.
Champions League. Yeah, I mean, he's in terms of, as I said, the mental side of the game. Salah's completely flawless. Well, yeah. So we'll leave City there anyway. Little half-hour chat on the City game. We're just going to look now at the state of play. Really, just have a look at the table, how teams are looking. So I'll run through a few of Liverpool's numbers before we get fully into it. So Liverpool currently third in the Premier League table, 1 point from the top. Fully enough, the team at the top we face next, Leicester. Liverpool are joint third in the league for goals scored, 18th for goals against, top for shots per 90, top for non-penalty expected goals, 13th for expected goals against. And obviously you couple those numbers in with the fact that Liverpool have had a tough start. So, you know, given those numbers, Dave, and obviously watching Liverpool and stuff like that, what's your read at the minute? What are you thinking?
Truthfully, I still think they look the best side in the division at the moment. And I think City will come good as well, to be honest. I still just see those two. I think Liverpool have started better, they've been better. I think the only big blemish, is that goals against record. But, you know, if you change that Aston Villa defeat to maybe a 3-0 one, what would that do? Let's have a look. So they've conceded 16. Say you take that down to a 3-0 loss, which would probably coincide more with maybe the XG on the day, you know, without the deflected goals and things. You know, you'd suddenly be on par with Newcastle, who are about, I think, 10th or 11th for goals against. And where are they on expected goals against? Yeah, see that they had one of the worst expected goals against, didn't they? Had just week by week slowly starting to fall back down a bit as well. So I think when they've been obviously without Van Dijk now, without Alisson for big part of the season so far, I think on the whole, I do think Liverpool look the strongest side, and those numbers are pretty solid so far.
I would agree that Liverpool, to me, look the strongest team, but the numbers don't really show it yet, do they? It's probably one of the reasons why we shouldn't overly be doing this, because it is still early. But I did a little test on myself before, and I've covered. If you look at the Premier League table on FBref, Dave, and if you cover the names of all the teams, and you look at solely the numbers, which teams would you have put to each numbers after 8 games this season? Because I would expect Liverpool to be Spurs. Spurs' numbers I would look at and think that's probably Liverpool. And Liverpool, I would think, is City. If you get what I mean there.
Yeah, I do. I do, but
Because
I do. Go on. Sorry, I was going to say I do think a lot of it comes down to that defensive, both expected goals against and goals against numbers. Because I think if you do that same, yeah, because if you look at the XG and things, and you look at goals for, they're right up there. Typical Liverpool. It's just that defensive record.
do you not think though that Liverpool's current numbers look a lot like City's last season in terms of City scoring more than any other team, but conceding loads as well?
Yeah,
So
but that.
I think
Go
Liverpool
on.
have almost assumed the mould of last season's City. And I think looking at Spurs' numbers, and this is not to say Spurs are going to do anything of note, although I do think it's possible. Spurs' numbers look a lot more level, really. You know, they've scored 19, conceded only 9. XG of about double the XG against. So I would expect that to be Liverpool. I'm quite surprised that it's not at Spurs, and you know, it's just interesting to look at these early numbers.
I can see the point you're making. Perhaps my judgment's clouded a little bit, same as yours, by the fact that I have watched Liverpool.
Mm.
And think that I do still think we're seeing the impact of that Villa game. You know, it, if the sample didn't include that Villa game, I know it doesn't work like that, but if it didn't, I think it would look a lot more normal, shall we say?
Yeah, I
So.
mean, if you sort your table by expected goal difference, Liverpool is still actually top,
Mm,
and that's even despite the Villa mess. You know,
mm,
whatever happened, Villa. So that's expected goals for minus expected goals against per match. Liverpool currently have +7. Second, Spurs on +6.2. Then Leicester on +5.7. And then Chelsea on +3.7. It's obviously difficult with City at the minute because they've played the game less. But I must admit, looking at City, Dave, I'm really not sold at all. I don't know what to expect of them this season. Like they've got Spurs next. Who have they got after that? Pretty sure they might have a bit of a tricky one. No, they haven't. They've got Spurs next, then they've got Burnley, Fulham, and then Manchester United. But I think the Spurs game will be interesting because the Spurs game's away. Spurs, according to the performance numbers, look good. Look like challenges, you could argue, especially considering the current squad and the fact that Mourinho's done it before, sort of thing. Even though I have watched the past few games that they've played and they have scraped wins. I think the 1-0 win against Burnley was undeserved. The 1-0 win against West Brom on the weekend was undeserved for me. I mean, he did enough gradually over time, but
mm.
most of the game he just let it drift really. But yeah, for me, I don't feel I don't feel safe with City at the minute. I don't feel convinced, in my opinion, on them. Don't know what to make of them.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with City though is I'm just having a look. Let me just isolate the Premier League for a second, 2 seconds. So, yeah, they've only lost one game, and it was that kind of mad fixture home to Leicester, the 5-2 with was it 2 or 3 penalties? I can't remember. There's a
3.
couple anyway, 3 penalties. Obviously they got exposed on the day, but I think that was just good tactics by Leicester and Rodgers. But since then, let's have a look. Yeah, the problem is the games. It seems like it's that thing where they're leaving too much to chance at the moment. Where no team is particularly outplaying them. They're not losing many games, but they're just not doing enough to secure victories. Like that, they are coming out on top on the XG in most games, even the games that they're drawing. But it's only ever by marginal amounts, and it's leaving too much to chance. And I think that's why they haven't been able to turn those draws into victories. That being said, I don't suspect that to remain the theme for the rest of the season. If you think of some of the issues they've had, I think we talked about on the pre-show last week. They haven't had a striker really, have they? With no Aguero, no Jesus. I think that's impacted them. They're obviously going to have one or both of them back, and I think they're needed in terms of implementing the philosophy they want. I expect Foden to keep growing and developing in that team and start playing more, and maybe playing that kind of silver role that we said they were potentially missing last season. I do expect them to start getting better, to be honest. I agree, so far it doesn't look good over the 7 games, but from what I can see there, they've still only lost one, and if they can just start doing a little bit more to secure victories, then I do expect them to be up there.
Yeah, I do expect them to get better, but I feel like my expectation of that happening is more based on the past and more based on what I know of a Guardiola team, than actually what I've seen so far. What I've seen so far, even in possession and stuff, it hasn't been too dissimilar to just a almost a bad / boring possession based team rather than an attacking side. Like they've scored 10 goals this season, they've conceded 9. And if you look at, I know obviously massive factor, Aguero's been out, Jesus has been out, they haven't had a striker. That probably comes into it quite a lot. And obviously they've played a game less, but even goals per 90, they're currently 11th in the league for goals per 90. They're averaging 1.4 goals per 90. Chelsea are top on 2.5 goals per 90. Liverpool are 4th on 2.3 goals per 90. And I just think if there's one thing Guardiola's teams have always had in the past, even if they haven't got the defence, they've always had the attack. And at the minute, they don't even look like they've got that.
I do think it's close. Sorry, go on. Finish what you're going to say, and I'll come back to that.
I was just going to say, Liverpool have had, in my opinion, a tougher start. And Liverpool's attacking numbers look a lot better. And I know Liverpool have had no attacking injuries. You know, this obviously comes into quite a lot, but I just think it's really out of character for City to be so almost stale in possession, like the appearance at the minute.
Yeah, I'm just as we were talking, I was having a quick glance, and in terms of things like touches in the attacking third and stuff, they are still getting there. There's only Liverpool who've had more on a per 90 basis so far, and it's only Liverpool and Villa who've had more in terms of touches inside the opposition's penalty area. So I do think they're still getting themselves into those areas. I just think they've missed that final ball or good movement from a proper forward in front to turn those like attacking moves into goals. That's why I do think it will start sharpening up.
I probably do as well. But I think for me, there's just a little bit more doubt there than there ever has been, really. Like in terms of the shots, obviously I mentioned that Liverpool were top for shots per 90. Liverpool average 16 shots a game. City are third for that, 14.4 shots per game, which isn't that different to Liverpool's really. But I think they just convert at a lower level, and I think the shots that they take aren't as good of a quality. Like if you look at Liverpool's expected goals per shot, it's the second best, behind only Leicester. City's expected goals per shot is a little tiny bit below mid-table. So they're still shooting a fair amount of times per game, but the shots when they come, they're not very clear cut. They're not easy to finish. Maybe that'll change now that Jesus is in the team. Obviously, with Jesus in the team, that moves Sterling out wide. It allows for maybe Torres to be a bench option, come on the hour mark. So I would expect them to improve, particularly with a striker. But I think these are weird numbers to the extent that they are worth flagging, considering it's supposedly Liverpool's main rivals. So I don't know. Maybe to round up, do you want to do this? I'll put you on the spot here. A top 4 prediction.
Oh, okay. Actually, it's not as tough as it sounds for me.
Yeah, I feel quite confident as well.
Yeah, I'll go with not in any particular order, by the way. I'm going to go with Liverpool. I am going to put Tottenham in there. Manchester City. But the fourth one does become a bit of an issue for me, I'll be honest, Josh, because I've got a feeling maybe yourself, maybe people listening will assume I'm going to say Leicester. But I'm not sure on Leicester because I think, and hear me out on this just briefly, I think with Leicester, they do look really good at the moment. Like, numbers are good. Obviously, top of the league, numbers look good. But particularly on the XG side of things, if you look at non-penalty XG, they dropped down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They dropped to about 12th, I think, in the division for non-penalty XG. They've had 7.
Only 2 teams in the league shoot less often than Leicester do.
So there we go.
Newcastle United and Sheffield United are the only 2 teams that shoot less frequently than Leicester in open play.
That's it. And I think, okay, they've got a really good forward, Jamie Vardy, who's absolutely perfect for their game. But I think for them to do anything of note this year, they've got to rely on him being fit for absolutely every game. And even then, we've said it so many times, and you just mentioned the shots there. The teams who shoot the most tend to win the most games because they score the most goals, and you're having to rely on really accurate finishing. I know they do create quality chances, of course they do, but I just think they're giving themselves too much work to try and have a really top campaign. So I'm actually not going to put them in my top 4. I'll expect them to drop off again, and I'll probably maybe go for someone like, might raise a few eyebrows, but I think I'm going to go with Chelsea on.
Chelsea was my pick.
Yes.
Mine was going to be Liverpool, City, Spurs, Chelsea, possibly in that order as well. I do think Leicester have an outside chance, largely because I think they're doing this. They're currently top of the league, despite being absolutely battered by injuries. And I think once you've got Ndidi back in the team, you've got Ricardo Pereira back in the team, and Vardy playing every minute and things like that. They're big players. So I wouldn't expect them to fall off that much. I think they'll still be a top 6 side. I don't see United doing that again this season.
No.
I can see Solskjaer maybe going mid-season or something like that. But I think Chelsea in particular, they just have an absolute wealth of goals. They just have so many attacking options. Ziyech is an output merchant. Werner is an output merchant. Tammy Abraham is a really, really good player. Chilwell, lots of attacking threat. Reece James, lots of attacking threat. Kurt Zouma from set pieces. Who?
Havertz,
Hudson-Odoi.
The team's a joke when you think about it.
They've got so many goals in that team. So I wouldn't expect them to encounter any issues on the attacking side. And I think considering how weird this season is, how tired everyone's going to be, I think that quality in the final third, we've seen defences keep very few clean sheets, and that's so far. So I think that output in the final third is going to have a big impact on the season this year, I think.
Yeah, it should probably flag as well, Josh. They've played the last 3 games. I haven't got the expected numbers to hand, but last 3 games they've conceded only 1 goal across fixtures against Sheffield United, which, okay, poor in attack. Burnley, Sadio's not great in attack, but it feels like a fixture in years gone by. Chelsea would concede because of Kepa and things, clean sheet there, and then obviously clean sheet at Old Trafford as well. So, it's not just the attacking side of things. It feels like, especially with Mendy coming in, they may have not, the defense isn't perfect, but they've probably just improved it ever so slightly. And even if they concede maybe 5 or 6 goals less than last season, that's probably going to have a big impact on the points as well.
Do you want to do a very quick one on relegation? Bottom 3?
Yeah, come on, let's do it. I'll let you go first this time, seeing as I took the limelight initially.
So I'm going to go West Brom, Fulham, Sheffield United.
Same as me. Yeah, I can't. I mean, if you look at the table now, obviously Brighton's down there, but we've spoke about Brighton and how bizarre it is with them.
How down there are Brighton?
They're actually 3 points above the relegation zone. Yeah,
4 points from Leeds in 1 place above them. They start winning games.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point. I mean, this is off topic. Sorry for people watching, but that was the point I was trying to say to you when we were talking on Friday night after they got beat. It was like I can see the principles, and they look good. And I agree with you; they are missing, at both ends that top player. Um, but at the same time, such a dinosaur saying, but it is true. It is a results business, and I think the longer you're going without results, the more people start questioning your philosophies and start questioning what's going on. And even at a really kind of forward-thinking club like Brighton, I could see it getting to the point where they think we need to tear this up and make sure that we stay in the division, and then they'll end up kind of reverting to someone who can do that. So I do think it's a little bit concerning for them.
Yeah, no, they need to start accumulating goals and wins basically because their performance numbers do look really, really good. Just for those that don't follow me, I posted a bit of an update the other day. How good is each Premier League attack? How good is each Premier League defence? And Brighton actually show up as having the best defence at the minute. I think they only face about 6 shots per game, and the expected goals of each of those shots isn't great either. So they're really good at keeping teams out, Brighton, but they just keep suffering from like bad finishing, penalties, just things like that. They need to start winning. But we'll round up there anyway. A little bit of a shorter episode than usual, but I think we've hit the 50-minute mark, so no complaints there. We'll be back next week to talk about whoever Liverpool have got next.
Leicester.
Leicester, yeah, of course. So yeah, we'll address that next week. Maybe we'll do a Q&A. We'll see how we go. But thanks for joining us, Dave.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks for tuning in. See you next week.